A series of unfortunate events by Lemony Skinner. Book the first, The Bad Beginning. Chapter 1. If you are interested in stories with happy endings, you are better off reading something else, because in this book, not only is there no happy ending, there is no happy beginning, and very few happy things happen in the middle. This is because not very many things happened in their lives. Of three Berkshire youngsters, Violet, Cullis and Sunny Bedware were intelligent children. They were charming and resourceful and pleasant facial features. But there was one extremely unlucky, and most things happened to them was rife with misfortune, misery and despair. I'm sorry to tell you this, but this is how the story goes. The misfortune began one day at Brittany Beach. Three elder children lived with their parents in an enormous mansion at the heart of dirty and busy city, and occasionally their parents gave them permission to take rickery trolley. The word rickery you'll probably know here means unsteady or likely to collapse, alone on the seashore, where they would spend their day as a sort of vacation as long as they were home for dinner. That particular morning it was grey and cloudy, which didn't bother but Claire youngsters one bit. When it was hot and sunny, Brittany Beach was crowded with tourists, and it was impossible to find a good place to lay one blanket. One grey and cloudy day, the Berkshires had the beach to themselves. They could do what they liked. Violet Bigler, the eldest, liked to skip rocks like most 14-year-olds. She was right-handed, so the rocks skipped farther across the murky water. When Violet used her right hand, then she used her left as she skipped rocks. She was looking out at the horizon and thinking about a new adventure she wanted to build. Anyone who knew Violet well could tell she was thinking hard, because her long hair was tied up in a ribbon to keep it out of her eyes. Violet had a real knack for inventing and building strange devices, so her brain was often filled with images of palfreys, levers and gears, and she never wanted to be distracted by something as trivial as her hair. This morning she was thinking about how to construct a device that retrieve a rock after you've skipped it into the ocean. Callas Blaudia, the middle child and the only boy who liked to examine creatures in tide pools. Callas was a little older than 12 and wore glasses, which made him look intelligent. He was intelligent. The Bleder parents had an enormous library in their mansion, a room full of 1,000 books, and nearly subject for him only 12. Callas, of course, had no read all books in the Berkshire library, but Dad had a great many of them and retrieved a lot of information from his reading. He knew how to tell an alligator from a crocodile. He knew how to kill Jealous and Kisra, and he knew how much about tiny slimy animals found at Brittany Beach. He was examining now. Sunny Brad's Claire was the younger. She liked to bite things. She was an infant and very small for her age. Slightly larger than a boot. What she lacked in size, however, she made up for with the size and sharpness of her 4 teeth. Sunny was and an age where most likely speaks a series of intelligent shrieks, except when she used a bottle of actual words in her vocabulary, like bottle, mummy, and bite. Most people had trouble understanding what it was Sunny was saying. For instance, this morning she was saying "gack" over and over, which probably meant look at the mysterious figure from the frog. Sure, sure enough, in the distance, along the misty shore of Brittany Beach, there could be seen a tall figure striding towards the bedroom children. Sunny had already been staring and shrieking at the figure for some time when Callus looked up. A spiky crab he was examining, and he saw it too. He reached over and touched Violet's arm, bringing her out of inventing thoughts. "Look at that!" Callus said, and pointed towards the figure. It was drawing closer, and children could see a few details. It was about the size of an adult, except its head was tall and rather square. "Why do you think it is? What do you think it is?" Violet asked. "I don't know," Callus said, squinting at it, "but it seems to be moving right toward us." "We're alone on the beach," Violet said, a little nervously. "There's nobody else it could be moving towards." She felt the slender, smooth stone in her left hand, which she had about to try to skip a sofa. She could suddenly throw it at the figure, but it might cause seem something frightening. "It seems scary," Callus said, as if I read in his sister's thoughts, because all of them missed this was true. As the figure reached them, the children saw with relief that it was not anybody frightening at all, but somebody they knew, Mr. Poe and Mrs. Poe. Mr. Poe, Mr. Poe and Mr. Poe was a friend of Mr. and Mr. Bricker, whom the children had met very times at dinner parties. One of the things Violet, Callus and Sunny really liked about their parents was that they didn't send the children away and the company had over, but allowed them to join the adults at the dinner table, and besides, in the conversation, as long as they helped clear the table, the children would breed Mr. Poe, because he always had a coat and was constantly accusing himself for the table to fake off in the next room. Mr. Poe took his top hat off, which had his head look a large square in the fog, and stood there for a moment, coughing loudly into a white handkerchief. Violet and Callus moved forward to shake his hand and say, "How do you do?" "How do you do?" said Violet. "How do you do?" said Callus. "Oh, you!" said Sunny. "Fine, thank you," said Mr. Poe, but he looked very sad for a few seconds. Nobody said anything, and the children wondered what Mr. Poe was doing out there at Brittany Beach when he should have been in the bank in the city where he worked. He was not dressed for the beach. "It's a nice day," Violet said, finally making a conversation. Sunny made a noise like an angry bird, and Callus picked up hers and held it. "Yes, it is a nice day," Mr. Poe said, absently staring out at the empty beach. "I'm afraid I have some very bad news for you children." The three backbencher siblings looked at him. Violet, with embarrassment, felt the stone in her left hand, was glad it had not been thrown at Mr. Poe. "Your parents," Mr. Poe said, "have been betrayed in a terrible fire. The children didn't say anything. They perished, Mr. Poe said, in a fire that destroyed the entire house. I'm very, very sorry to tell you this, my dears. Violet took her eyes off Mr. Poe and stared out at the ocean. Mr. Poe had never called the Berkshire children my dears before. She understood the words he was saying, but thought he might be joking, playing a terrible joke on her brother and sister. Perished, Mr. Poe said, means killed. We know what the word perish means, Carla said crossly. He didn't know what the word perish meant, but he was still having trouble understanding exactly what it was that Mr. Poe had said. It seemed to him that Mr. Poe must somehow have misspoken. The fire department arrived, of course, Mr. Poe said, but they were too late. The entire house was included in fire. It burned to the ground. Carlos pictured all the books in the library going up in flames. Now he'd never read all of them. Mr. Poe coughed several times into his handkerchief before continuing. I sent my retrieve you here and take you to my home, where you'll stay for some time while we figure things out about your pet. We figure things out. I am executor of your parents' estate. That means I will be handing the uttermost fortune, figuring where you children will go. When Violet comes out of age, the fortune will be yours, but the bank will take charge until you're old enough. Although he said Mr. Poe was an executor, Violet felt like Mr. Poe was an executioner. He had simply walked down the beach to them and changed their lives forever. Come with me, Mr. Poe said, and held out his hand. It order, take it. Violet had to drop the stone she was holding. Carlos took Violet's other hand, and Sunny took Carlos's other hand, and in the manner of the three Belgian children, the Belgian orphans now were led away from the beach into their pursuers' lives. Hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, and share.